Hi, I'm Danielle, and this is Chatter Out Loud, a podcast where I share thoughts and TV commentary on shows I like to watch. Now, before I start, I want to ask that you go ahead and like, follow, share, and subscribe. And on YouTube, where I upload my companion episode of my podcast, be sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. This way you can get a notification every time I post a new episode, and you won't miss out. All right, so welcome back. Thank you so much for joining me. Your presence is very much appreciated. Okay, so in episode 1 of The Circle, they left off at the end of the episode with Mel B and Emma, aka Scary and Baby Spice, walking down the hall to enter the apartment, thereby entering the game. Their banter, once they entered the apartment, was pretty funny. They are huge fans of The Circle, and they are catfishing. They find out their profile, and remember, Frank, he got to choose the profile because he was rated number 1, the top influencer. And so he was able to choose between Jared's profile and I think Trey's profile. And he wound up selecting Jared. So Spice Girls are going in as Jared. That's the profile that they're playing behind. And Jared is a children's author. And like a lot of you, the original profile picture of Jared, it looked a little frightening. Oh, well, I should say he just looked unfriendly. He didn't look friendly. Let's put it that way. And there were better pictures in his album, and I'm not sure why they chose to select the original one. But this year in the game, thank God, they get 2 profile pictures. So they get the original one, and then they get a backup one. Or a second one, I should say, not a backup, a second one. So the Spice Girls picked a second picture that was a little friendlier, and it was of him holding a chicken. I don't know if that's any better, but I don't know. They also struggled to write the profile for Jared, which was hilarious to me. So just to remind us all, Frank, John Carroll, Brew, Yuling, Parker Paul, Alyssa, and Krissa are soon the Spice Girls, Jared, are in the game now, right? The Spice Girls, Jared, have to remain undetected in the game for the grand prize to go up by 50 grand. They are also calling the Spice Girls mission the Secret Spice. So we're watching them chat in the circle and come up with a story and their background, and it's pretty funny. All right, the house guests play Cake Me As I Am. That's a game that they played last year. And I think this is a pretty popular game. I've only ever watched season 3, and I remember seeing this Cake Me As I Am last season. So they they really decorate a cake to showcase their personality. The cake has to be 4 layers, and they only have 30 minutes to decorate it. And just like last season, the cakes were interesting. Most of them. They upload a picture of the cake to the news feed. First, everyone seemed to be impressed by Chris's cake. They liked Spice Girls Jared's cake. And immediately, John Carroll doesn't believe a man decorated that cake. So needless to say, he's like suspicious of Spice Girls Jared. Alyssa's cake is all about sex. She had something about a pocket rocket on there, and everybody was like, what? Alyssa is committed to her profession. Let's just put it that way. All right. And then Parker Paul and John Carroll also suspects that a man. Oh, wait, no, let me say that again. Parker Paul suspects that John Carroll's cake couldn't have been done by a woman or something to that effect. At this point in the game, Parker Paul is suspicious of John Carroll and vice versa. John Carroll is suspicious of Parker Paul, and they're looking at the cakes and really scrutinizing, like, did a man make that cake? Did a girl do that cake? So that's what's going on there. They all suspected that John Carroll's cake wasn't done by a woman, right? That's what I was just alluding to. And in the end, Chris's cake was the most liked. And she got a whisk trophy. It was like gold plated. It was cute. All right. Brew, he started a chat with Alyssa and Yuling. It was his attempt at starting an alliance, and they named that alliance hashtag the Happy Throuple. Parker Paul attempts to reach out to John Carroll, remembering both are catfishing. Well, this backfires on Parker Paul as John Carroll kind of figures out that Parker Paul is really playing. They're really playing similar games. He picks this up from the commonality that their quote unquote kids have being in college and studying communication. Right. All right. Frank, he is getting upset because he continues to be interrupted by these private chat invites or getting an alert. He doesn't like to be disturbed. He wants to finish eating and go to bed and things like that. And I'm like, this is part of the game, Frank. What is happening? And maybe he's just playing it up for the camera. Yeah, that's what I think. Anyway, Frank, Krissa, and Spice Girls Jared, they get to know one another. This is another alliance form, and I was trying to find the hashtag. Oh, their hashtag is #3 is the magic number. All right. Frank and John Carroll decide, and remember, Frank and John Carroll, they were rated number 1 and number 2. They were the influencers this week. So they get to decide which player to block. And since Spice Girls Jared are new in the game, they are exempt. They deliberated in the influencer chat, and they decided to block Parker Paul. So John Carroll was the one who delivered the message to the chat. Parker Paul was blocked, and needless to say, Parker Paul was very upset. One observation in this episode was that John Carroll, I think he thinks that he is very controlled in this game and very strategic, and I think he'll wind up making a mistake, but we'll have to see. Don't forget, when someone is blocked, they get to meet one player face to face. And that's how episode 2 ends, with the cliffhanger of Parker Paul going down the hall, getting ready to meet one player face to face. All right, we pick up in episode 3. This episode starts with Parker Paul on their way to meet a player face to face. And as suspected, Parker Paul went to meet John Carroll. They were both surprised about one another catfishing. It was a very nice conversation. They even realized that Brew, right, is a famous TikToker. But because John Carroll is catfishing, he can't really admit to knowing who Brew is, right? They're not in the same age range in terms of audiences, right? So we also learned that Parker Paul doesn't know who Rod Stewart is, nor does she know any old people bands for that matter. That's what she says. So she doesn't know what a memoir is. She doesn't know old people bands. Yet she chose to enter the game as her dad, who would know both of these things. And so it wasn't as easy as she thought, right? And we all saw it coming, a 21-year-old playing a 56-year-old. I didn't think that would work out well for her, and she didn't do well at it at all. All right. The next morning, they get an updated news feed where Parker Paul reveals who she is. She didn't reveal John Carroll exactly, but she did say, she told the circle in the chat, she said, don't trust everyone, but she didn't call out or single out John Carroll. So now they were trying to figure out, well, who did Parker Paul visit? John Carroll tried to get ahead of all of this and just admitted Parker Paul came and visited me, right? Visited him or her, right? Because John is playing as Carroll. And during that chat, Alyssa threw John Carroll under the bus. And now they all have suspicions about one another. Alyssa then tries to connect with the Spice Girls Jared in a private chat. Obviously, it's her strategy where she's trying to secure safety. It's hysterical when they have these chats. Every word is scrutinized and everyone thinks everyone is catfishing. Like they say one thing, she's a catfish. See, this doesn't add up. This doesn't measure up. The Spice Girls Jared thought that they did a good job talking with Alyssa, and they believe that they threw her off the scent. But we'll have to see. All right, John Carroll invites Yu Ling to a private chat. And the way what cracks me up with John Carroll is the way he keeps calling people dear or honey. It's hysterical to me. I mean, obviously he thinks this is a way of acting like a mom, right? An older person. but it's just funny. Hey, dear. And chatting with Yuling is John Carroll's way of building more allies in the game. So that's a smart game move, yes. Later in that morning, we meet the two new players, right? We meet Rachel, who is 29. She's a paranormal researcher. She's entering the game as herself. And she did something with this witch oil to protect the house. Okay. Then we meet Alex, who is 28. He's a commercial banker. He's entering the game as Nathan, a 22-year-old fresh out of college and who's a frat boy. And Alex Nathan believes he's the smartest player in the game. By the way, when Alex came into the game, he was wearing a sweatshirt that says Strategic AF. Just an observation. Each of them set up their profiles and they are officially in the game. All right, the house guests get an alert and announce the new players in the game. Each of the new players get to choose 2 players to chat with, right? So Alex Nathan chose Frank and Brew. He tried to have a bro alliance. That's what I think he was going for there. They let him know that there has already been a catfish. And this was after Alex Nathan asked, like, what's going on in the game. And I thought that was a very smart approach. He wanted to know who, if they found out who was catfishing, who the influencers were. So I thought that was a pretty good approach coming into the game. Rachel chose to send a private chat to, an invite for a private chat to Yuling and Spice Girls Jared. She chose them because of what they said in their profile. Rachel felt good about Yuling, but she was suspicious of Spice Girls Jared. And I think that's because it took the Spice Girls Jared a long time to answer in the chat. And we've seen this since they've entered the game. Sometimes they hesitate. Maybe we should do this. And they're like, delete it. And then they say something else and then they delete it. It is hysterical because, again, they're catfishing. So they're playing as a 28-year-old. So it's just funny to watch. All right, the house guests are throwing a 90s party. A lot of them are 90s babies, right? They, of course, play Spice Girls music. And a lot of them are fans of the Spice Girls. So they say. Spice Girls Jared gets an alert that during the party they have a secret mission. The other house guests will be told that they are behind. They, meaning the Spice Girls, are behind a profile. And they'll have to guess which profile that they think the Spice Girls are playing behind. So they have to work to keep it under wraps. And if no one detects the Spice Girls behind the profile that they're playing under, it increases the grand prize by $50,000, right? Well, they haven't told them that part yet, but they said that the Spice Girls are playing under a profile. You'll have time to vote and guess. Okay. When everyone's in the chat, I think John Carroll, he messed up with his message about not having danced like that in a long time. And the last time he danced like that was before she had kids, right? And here's where I say, John Carroll thought he was playing so well, and he said something so small like this that's really monumental, right? Because what do you mean? And people started doing the math, right? And it didn't add up because that would mean that John Carroll would have had to start a family beginning at 39. Uh-oh. Then the Spice Girl Jareds may have caused suspicion when trying to relate to Alex Nathan and how young he is. But then Alyssa goes, Spice Girls Jared caused suspicion onto themselves because Alyssa heard them say, hey, they were trying to relate to Alex Nathan because Alex Nathan, quote unquote, didn't know, he's 22, didn't know who the Spice Girls were. And then Spice Girls Jared tried to say, yeah, I feel you, I understand. And Alyssa's like, but wait, Jared is 28. What do you mean you don't know who the Spice Girls are? So that was another suspicion thrown out there. Anyway, the episode ends with another cliffhanger with an alert with a very important message. And then they show Mel B and Emma's video to the house guests where they share that they are secretly playing behind one of the profiles. And then they tell them that they'd have to guess which profile they think they are behind. And in their guesses and stuff, it'll include consequences. So that's how that episode ended. So now the house guests know the Spice Girls are in the game, and they have to figure out and guess which profile they're playing. And their guesses will cause consequences. So we'll have to see that. So that was episode 2 and 3. I think I'm going to stop there. I'm going to put episode 4 in its own recording. So what do you think so far? Do you think John Carroll is playing a strong game? Or whose game do you think is really going well right now? And are there any holes? Do you think people will be found out? All right, you have to let me know what you think in a comment. All right, and that's all I have. So be sure to come back and give me a listen. I love for you to like, share, follow, and subscribe. Thank you very much. All right, my name is Danielle, and you're listening to my podcast, Chatter Out Loud. Thank you so much for joining me, and as always, I appreciate your support. Thanks again for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.